I don't think this is protocol.
I don't think this is protocol.
Sorry, Phil.
That's
Good try.
right.
Good try.
It was a good try. It was. Excellent. Everyone, please take your seats.
Yeah, you'll have some opportunity afterwards. So, Phil, I will not turn you away, but we got to roll.
That's right. Take your seats. Come on in. Are you guys excited? Oh, come on. Are you guys excited to hear from Steve Andersson? All right, very good. Now, this is not the same Steve Andersson we recently heard from, so I'm going to let Dr. David Phelps introduce him.
So I got the opportunity to meet Steve Andersson probably 3 years ago through another mastermind meeting where actually his wife, Karen, who is a magnificent marketer, publisher in her own right, and Steve came to the dinner that evening, and I just got to sit and listen and meet this fine gentleman. And it wasn't until he recently published the book that you have on the table that I thought, this is the guy that I need to bring to the meeting, because when you understand what he's done with the book, you'll see why he's here today. So let me just give you a little bit of Steve's background, then I'm going to let him roll. Steve spent over 35 years shaping the insurance industry through a deeper understanding of emerging technologies and how businesses today can best integrate and leverage them. Steve is a sought-after speaker and influencer. He is also the author of the widely anticipated book, The Bezos Letters, where he reveals 14 principles for business growth based on the ideas and patterns that emerged when he examined Jeff Bezos' 21 annual letters to Amazon shareholders. Steve's here today to share some of the key insights that he discovered through that analysis. Please give a standing, warm Freedom Founders welcome to Mr. Steve Andersson.
Thank you.
Take it away.
Appreciate it. Thank you. It really is a great pleasure for me to be here today. Well, January 27th, 1967. Anybody remember that day? Actually, 3 astronauts at Cape Canaveral got into an elevator and rode to the top of the Saturn V rocket that was sitting there, waiting to send them in about 2 weeks on the first Apollo 1 mission. Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee got into that capsule. They were locked in to do a full test of the systems on that. A few minutes later, an electrical spark ignited 100% oxygen atmosphere, and within just a mere seconds, all 3 were lost. It was a massive tragedy and really shook NASA to its core. 25 years ago, a financial analyst in New York City was researching this thing called the internet. Now remember, 25 years ago, most of us didn't even know what it was. And he came across this statistic that caught his attention. The internet usage in 93, 94, 95 was growing at 2,300% per year. And he started thinking, what kind of business would that enable? Well, as you might guess, he started selling books. Moved to Seattle, and the story goes on from there. What I did in this book and the Bezos Letters is to examine the letters to shareholders that Jeff Bezos has written, 21 now, encompassing almost 50,000 words. And what I discovered in that research was that Jeff Bezos laid out, hidden in plain sight, his plan for growing Amazon. And I believe that those insights that he has, and I've identified 14 principles that I believe he used to grow Amazon, that can apply to any business represented in this room. And that's what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about, what some of those principles are. And so, a couple of points just to start with. What can you learn from Amazon? Now, believe me, I recognize in a room of this size, there are probably some people here who don't like Amazon. Maybe you don't even like Bezos all that much, especially over the last few years. But I think it's hard to argue that Amazon hasn't been successful. And I was curious, why. What did he do different? How does he think different? And how can that apply to what you do? So, key to success, what can you learn from Jeff Bezos and what he's thought? And what is your return on risk? Now, David talked a little bit earlier that for many of you that are in the dental practice, have a practice, are risk averse. You're taught to be very cautious. I come from the insurance industry. I think we're more risk averse than you all are. Why? Because in the insurance industry, we see everything that can go wrong just about every day. And there's a lot. And so I come out of that industry. And so, but the last 20 years, I was spending time really looking at technology and the development and the new stuff coming and figuring out, okay, what is it? How can it be used? And what kinds of things should insurance agents and brokers, my primary target at that point, do to utilize that successfully? And so that whole idea of risk being a positive, not always a negative. And we're going to explore that idea a little bit more. So what does Amazon do? Well, this is what they say they do in their latest 2019 10K report. If you want some really, really boring reading, feel free. It's hard to get through. But it starts out with this statement. We seek to be Earth's most customer-centric company. We are guided by 4 principles, and they're listed there, but I'm going to put them up here for you. We are guided by customer obsession rather than competitor-focused. We are guided by passion for invention. We are guided by a commitment to operational excellence. Does anybody here shop on Amazon? By the way, how many of you are Prime members? I think it's irresponsible not to be. But that is a whole story in how Prime came about because of this idea for invention and operational excellence. And then long-term thinking. So kind of 4 principles that are guiding Amazon today. And again, how can these apply? Well, keys to Amazon success. I put this in here just to give you an indication of their success. Now, you can see the stock, pricing and Bezos being the richest man in the world and all of those kinds of things. But there are other things that indicate their success. First, fastest company ever to reach $100 billion in sale. That's a lot, isn't it? That's a lot of stuff that gets delivered to your doorstep. Wall Street Journal and Drucker Institute started a couple years ago an analysis to pick the top 250 best managed companies. They use 37 different indicators to come up with that ranking. Some of it has to do with their innovation. Some of it has to do with their social responsibility. Some of it has to do with financial management. Amazon has been at 1 or 2 in that ranking for the last couple of years. Best managed company. I will tell you their ranking in their social consciousness for a company is low. Their ranking for innovation is double any other company on that list. And actually, I think we're seeing some steps in the direction of improving their interaction with consumers and the environment and those kinds of things. 2020, LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn, analyzing all of their data. Where do people want to work? Job openings, how many people actually go in to those jobs, get interviews, and more importantly, I think, how long do they stay there? LinkedIn in 2020 was 3rd place as the most desired place to get a job. Why? Right? We hear a lot about working at LinkedIn, working at Amazon. But an indicator here, and maybe there's something else there. And then, starting in 2010, American Consumer Satisfaction Score, top score, in fact, top consumer satisfaction score ever. Why? So let me ask you, why do you shop on Amazon? It's easy. Do you know I've asked that question now a lot, and always the answer, at least some of the answer, is it's easy. And there is intentionality behind that. That doesn't just happen. It's very specific and designed. So the question I started asking is this: what if the biggest risk you all face is actually not taking enough risk? And lots of reasons why that takes place. So here are the 14 principles. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to talk and cover each one of them today. But I have picked out a couple of them to talk about. And I have categorized them into 4 cycles: test, build, accelerate, and scale. And I believe every business goes through those cycles, and in fact, different parts of a business could be in any one of those cycles at any one time. And so to think about what do we have to do when we're new and starting up or testing, or what if we have a new product, or for many of you, what if we have a new procedure that we want to try, that we're hearing about? That's in the test phase, and how do we go about doing that? So let's talk about each of these set phases or cycles. So test, 3 principles here: encourage successful failure, bet on a big ideas, and practice dynamic invention and innovation. I do want to say at this point, I think the whole word innovation is absolutely the wrong word to use. Because you can't innovate something until you invent something, and you won't invent something until you experiment to find out what should be invented. Businesses all, you know it, you hear it the same as I do, talk about innovation, and we don't talk about invention and experimentation. And that leads certainly to that first principle: encourage successful failure. Now, I know you probably don't hear those 2 words put together very often, do you? Successful failure. What does that even mean? So, here's some of what Bezos says, and I've got a number of quotes out of his letters. Failure comes part and parcel with invention. It's not optional. We understand that and believe in failing early and iterating until we get it right. So what do I mean by encourage successful failure? Well, how many times have something that you've done failed, but you learned a lot from it? So let me give you a couple of examples. Amazon. Can anybody tell me what you think Amazon's biggest failure has been over the last 25 years? Whole Foods. Okay. Maybe for Whole Foods, but we'll talk a little bit more about what Whole Foods is making possible, actually, for Amazon and for you. Fire phone. Nobody ever guesses this, by the way. Did anybody know that Amazon actually built and sold a phone? Jeff Bezos got up on stage a la Steve Jobs and announced in 2014 the Fire phone. It was an abysmal failure. Now remember, 2014, who needed a phone? Nobody. We already had an Android or an iPhone. And the phone had a couple technologically interesting things to it, but it was a phone, and actually not that great a phone. It was a device to help you shop on Amazon. Why do I need that? I already have my browser. I have apps. Right? End of that fourth quarter of 2014, Amazon wrote off $178 million in inventory and development costs. big failure. But you know what? Amazon is okay with that. Bezos is okay with that. They tried it, didn't work. 4 months after the Fire phone was announced on that stage, Jeff Bezos got his first demonstration for what would become Alexa. Echo, the hardware. Alexa, the machine learning software that recognizes your question and answers you. How many have an Echo at home? Would you agree Echo is a fairly successful product for Amazon? And only getting better and more. I have now, I've got on the beta cycle for Alexa Auto. So I have a little device in my car that is retrofitted that allows Alexa to do things with the car and listening to music and things like that are completely hands-free. So people ask me, where did that successful failure come from? Well, the end of the Apollo story, Apollo 1, huge disaster. Another Apollo mission didn't lift off that launch pad for 20 months. Shook NASA to its core, because frankly, as the flight director of that mission said, we killed those astronauts because we didn't do our job right. Apollos went, completely redesigned the command module. Missions went to the moon. We know in July 1969, Neil Armstrong stepped off the limb, said those famous words, "We made it to the moon before the end of the decade." Apollo 12 was next, went back, and then Apollo 13. In April of 1970, lifted off the launch pad in Cape Canaveral, actually Cape Kennedy at that point, and about 56 hours later, what happened? Oxygen tank exploded, popularized by the 1995 Ron Howard movie called Apollo 13. Actually, a reasonably accurate depiction of what happened. One of the key points, though, Gene Kranz, who was the flight director at the time that happened, actually never, ever said the words, "Failure is not an option." That was the screenwriter in the movie script. And the famous words, "Houston." Actually, when you listen to the tapes, which I have, it's "Houston, we've had a problem." Little difference there. You all know the end of the story. And by the way, huge, 50th anniversary of that coming up here in April. Huge story behind what happened, but I have people that were in that room that were also part of Apollo 1 have said, if it wasn't for the tragedy of Apollo 1, we likely would have never gotten to the moon because of what they learned from it. Now, huge tragedy, don't get me wrong. Tom Hanks in the movie, playing Jim Lovell, the commander of that Apollo 13 mission, narrates as he's stepping off the helicopter that plucked them out of the ocean onto the deck of the Iwo Jima. And he says, our mission, Apollo 13, became known as NASA's most successful failure. Didn't make it to the moon, but we got all 3 astronauts back alive. And it was built on many, many years of testing, checklists, figuring out, practicing, etc. So that's where this idea comes from. This is a long quote. I've bolded a little bit here for you, and I'm going to highlight a couple of these in that next slide. But strategic failure mindset. And here's the key points out of that quote. Failures need to scale with the size of your company. You see in that quote from the 2018 letter, Bezos says, we need billion-dollar failures. Now, I don't know about you. I can't get my head around that. We need failures because he says if we're not what? What's the word I've already used? If we're not experimenting, And by the way, an experiment actually means you will likely fail. So if we're not experimenting and failing, we're not moving the needle enough to make an impact on our business at Amazon and also your business. Large-scale risk-taking is a service. Now think about this. At Amazon, Bezos said, we're of a scale where we can provide a service of testing and iterating and suffering these failures so that other industries can learn from us. And a big bet can cover the cost of many losses. Now, Amazon's had some big bets. And Bezos has identified 3 of their big bets. 1, Prime. Early 2000s, Bezos had this crazy idea that we're going to give everybody free shipping for an annual subscription price of $79. The number crunchers at Amazon actually said we'd have to charge $250 just to cover the shipping costs. Everybody was against it, except Bezos. And he pushed it forward. You see, what Bezos knew, 1, is that the more volume you had, what happens to pricing? What happens to shipping costs, right? What happens to? And based on studies, those of you that are Prime members spend 2.7 times as much as a non-Prime Amazon shopper. It may be the limited example of you make it up on volume, right? Second, Amazon Marketplace. Craziest idea ever. We're going to let our competitors, third-party sellers, have access to the Amazon website and our customers to sell their own products. Why? Well, here's what Bezos said. If we don't have a product in stock and a third-party seller does, then it's better for our customers. If they have a better price than we can get, it's better for our customers. And he thinks if it's better for your customers, it will ultimately be better for Amazon and our shareholders. In 2018, for the first time, he indicated the share of third-party sellers' sales, 58% in 2018 of the sales of products on Amazon were by third-party sellers, meaning small businesses, that they are enabling to use what they've built in their platform. Third big bet, AWS, Amazon Web Services. They never intended that to be a product. They built AWS for their own internal use because the IT department, quote unquote, was the bottleneck for getting new development done quickly. So they made it basically all the normal stuff that you would need, everybody could access, self-service model, all kinds of stuff there, and they continued to build that going forward. So my question for you is, what is your company's employee award for the most successful failure? Or do you fire them? See, people aren't afraid of failure, I believe. People, employees, are afraid of the consequences of failure. And if you're not encouraging that, you're not getting the best ideas that you haven't thought of that maybe are crazy, but you know what? Sometimes those crazy ideas work. Cycle number 2, build. 3 principles here. We're going to talk about customer obsession. Because that is core. That's in their statement on their 10K and everything you may hear about Amazon. Customer obsession. Now, I know those of you that deal with customers, you're worried about customer service, customer engagement, customer focus, customer journey. But are you really obsessed with your customer? That's a different word. It has a different idea behind it. You see, at Amazon, they invent on behalf of the customer. They don't wait for the customers to tell them what they want. There was nobody telling Bezos that we want free shipping. But guess what? What was free shipping? You remember free shipping in those early days? And you'd go be shopping, and then they'd hide the shipping till the very end, right? Yeah, because they knew it was what? A stumbling block. It was friction. And if you can take friction out of your engagement with a customer, how will that improve what they feel with you, how they trust you, and how they stay with you? So obsess over customers. It's one of the 14 Amazon leadership principles. And again, you can read this. Obsess over customers. We start with the customer and work backward. Too many companies start with what we're good at, what else can we sell? Not start with the customer and what's their pain point, what can we create and develop that will help them. 3 customer pillars at Amazon: wide selection, low prices, and fast delivery. In fact, Bezos says in a fairly recent letter, I cannot imagine that our customers will want higher prices, less selection, and slower delivery. I can't either. I can't either. And so my principle, my growth principle, is obsess over customers. That's where sometimes the leadership principles and my growth principles overlap. And the biggest risk a successful company faces is their success. Because what does that do to a company? Complacency. They start protecting what got them there instead of what? Killing their own business and looking at what's going to happen in the future. Okay? So success is a big risk. So my point here is Amazon destroying retail? You hear that a lot, right? Amazon's destroying retail. Or is retail just protecting what got them there, not what's going to get them to the future? On the left-hand side there, has anybody been in an Amazon bookstore? Different bookstore, isn't it? Because Bezos was asked since 2006, are you going to open physical stores? And his response was, no, not until we can figure out something that's different that we can provide to the customer. If you go, you can see it there. If you go into the Amazon bookstore, it is very different. Every book, except for maybe the travel section, every book has its cover facing out. And you don't go to an Amazon bookstore to buy a book that you know you want to read. What do? Order it. You'll have it tomorrow. Or Kindle, you'll have it in seconds. You go to Amazon to discover what you might want to read next. And so they have whole shelves that on the top says, if you read this, you likely will like these, right? Where have you seen that? You're shaking your heads. Where have you seen that, right? Online. They're taking that online. I still like going into a bookstore, kind of poking around. And every book has a card with a QR code on it that you can take your Amazon app and scan the code, take you right to the ratings and reviews. You can buy it for the same price at the bookstore that you can buy it online. And they do have inventory. And they are able to take their bookstores and allow them to be local. So they have sections where what people are reading here. So they just opened a new one in Nashville. And so it would be, what are the popular titles in Nashville? And they'll have a whole section and stock those. Typically, a book doesn't make it into Amazon Bookstore if it's less than a 4-star rating. Right? But ratings and reviews, right? That's how Amazon knows. In fact, Amazon invented ratings and reviews that we rely on everywhere we go today. On the right-hand side is a fulfillment center. I've been in 2 different fulfillment centers, had tours. By the way, anybody here can go on to amazon.com/FC, Fulfillment Center Tours, and find one close to you. Highly recommend it. It's an astounding place. The technology is absolutely amazing. Have you ever wondered what happens when you click buy till it hits on your front porch? That's transportation at Amazon. Fulfillment centers are a key part of that. Here's another picture of the bookstores, and you can see different layouts and things like that. They've also got hardware and some other things like that there. And again, here's a picture of me in the Chattanooga Fulfillment Center. First time, by the way, I was able to actually take a picture inside a fulfillment center, but only in that spot, right? They're protecting their intellectual property. So what do these stores have in common? Anybody recognize any of them? Warby Parker, Indochino. I actually am wearing an Indochino suit. It's a custom-made suit for $400. Untuckit shirts, right? And then Casper. All of these now have physical retail locations. Why? What we're learning is that interaction of online and physical store actually makes a lot of sense. I decided to leave this in here. I talk to my clients a lot about this client value matrix. I thought it might be helpful. Left-hand side is profitability, bottom is maintenance. My wife says that she's actually pretty good because she knows she's high maintenance. At least she knows it if she tells me. But if your clients are high maintenance, is that good or bad? Well, it depends. So if you have a high maintenance client but low profitability, what do we call those? The dogs. If you have a high maintenance and high profitability, that's a question mark, isn't it? Are they worth it or not? Do you have low maintenance, low profitability? Those could be your stars. What else could you do with them to bring them up? And you have your cash cows, high profitability, low maintenance. Here's the problem with cash cows, though. Businesses tend to ignore them because they tend to be low maintenance. They don't need a lot of interaction, but they are high profitable. So what are you going to do? Well, you fire the dogs, you invest in the stars, you move the question marks over, and you focus on your highest valued clients. I'll get a copy of these slides too, so you can be, you can have some of this. Bezos' 1998 letter. Here's the highlight. I constantly tell our employees to be very afraid, not of competitors, but of customers. To wake up every morning. Why? Because our customers are loyal to us up until the second somebody else gives them a better deal. That's a mindset of how we handle that. I love this quote by Clay Christensen out of The Innovator's Dilemma. This is what all successful companies face. The challenge is focusing on customers' current needs while you're developing and figuring out their future needs. Cycle number 3, accelerate. We have 4 principles here. I'm going to concentrate on make complexity simple. What does that mean? Well, at Amazon, it's easy. They have hundreds of tests going on all the time. Every single element on that page that you see, be it the product page or the first page or wherever you're looking, has been tested hundreds of times. There is a very data-driven, strategic reason everything's there. To the point of, by the way, and I've just been shopping a little bit more and kind of looking at it in a different light, even to the point of there's statements there that says this could be available from other merchants cheaper. Back to that idea, is it better for the customers, right? Who does that? Guess what Walmart's starting to do? Just announced, I just read about it this week. Walmart Plus. Walmart starting a Prime from Walmart. Little late to the game, don't you think? You think Walmart's worried? They should be. One of the better examples is a Kindle. Announced in 2007 with the audacious goal, according to Bezos, of reinventing the book. Something that's been around for 500 years. And in order to be successful at that, we have to think differently. And what they realized is the benefit of a book is actually that it fades away. When you're in a good book, are you thinking about how nice the paper is? Or how it feels to hold the book? What are you thinking about? The story, right? That's what they wanted with the Kindle. But they had to improve the book. If I know, now for a lot of books, sometimes the nighttime reading, the mysteries, and those kinds of things, I might not want to take notes. But if I know it's a book I want to learn from, I want it on a Kindle. Me. Why? Because I can highlight it. I can make my own executive summary by going then onto the website where all those highlights are stored for me. They made the book better with electronic. How about this one? Anybody been inside an Amazon Go store? Not yet? Yeah. Amazon Go, it's a convenience store, and literally you go in the front door. They're like subway gates. You have to scan the app, either your Amazon app or a specific Amazon Go app, with a barcode to open the gate. You walk inside, and you can see it's kind of like a convenience store. You've got chips and pre-made sandwiches and drinks and nuts and kind of normal convenience store stuff. And you put it all in your basket, put it in a bag, and literally you just walk out. There is no checkout. What's the worst thing about going to the grocery store? And self-checkout's worse. Isn't it? Last week, Amazon opened their first Amazon Go grocery store. Now, the original stores were about 1,500 square feet. This store is a little over 10,000 square feet. It includes produce. I gotta fly to Amazon and see how they handle buying a piece of fruit, right, at the store with just walk-out technology. But here's what's even more important. They've been experimenting with this technology for about 5 years. And they have announced that they will be licensing this technology to other retailers. By the way, that's not altruism. They will charge for licensing the technology that they built. But make complexity simple. Where in your business do customers meet friction? The way I like to say it is, what can you do to take friction out of your interaction with your customers? Is it paying? Is it, I have a great local dentist. Long story, I owe him money. And he sends me a bill. What do I want to do? I don't have a check. No, he's right. Just from a couple weeks ago. The insurance didn't do what I thought it was going to do. So I owe money. He's making it difficult for me to pay him because I want to go online. That's just a little example. I don't have checks. What? And by the way, I'm old. What about all the young people out here, right? So where are friction points? This one here is the Amazon 4-star store. So this is like a variety store. It's just that any item in this store has to be rated 4 stars or higher on Amazon.com. Kind of similar to the bookstore, but all kind of kitchen and all kinds of different stuff, hardware. Make complexity simple. Frustration-free packaging. You see, at Amazon, toys are the best example. I have I have 7 grandchildren, 6 and under. They were all together at Christmas. Woo! And I was afraid trying to get toys out of the packaging, right? Scissors and knives and ties and, right? In fact, we bought, this is a few years ago, special scissors, right, to cut the plastic. When you're shopping on Amazon, do you need that? No, because they have pictures. When you're shopping in the store, you do, because you want the children walking by going, "Mommy, I want that." But frustration-free. Now, plain box, easily recyclable. Get rid of all that junk that we throw away now. Were customers asking for this? No. They're inventing on behalf of the customer. Talk about self-service. And I love this phrase. And Amazon is huge on self-service. In fact, Amazon's mindset about customer service is the best customer service is no service. It's either automated, we automatically recognize there was a problem, or you can self-serve and take care of it. Now, they do have, by the way, call centers you can call. My wife Karen has done that a couple of times, and what's interesting there is those people are actually empowered to do something. So that's a whole other story there. But self-service is, you don't get the gatekeepers who said that will never work, because some of the stupid, crazy ideas, guess what? They actually do work. And so how are you handling that? Accelerate time with technology. So real quick, what do I mean by that? Do you feel like things are going faster today than they've ever gone? Is it harder for you to keep up with all the changes, the new technology, the new platforms, the new this, the new that? Absolutely it is. And there are reasons for that. And that's what I mean by it feeling like time is accelerating. Couple, again, I won't go into depth on these, but Moore's Law, processing power. Gordon Moore, founder of Intel Corporation. The number of transistors per square inch of processor doubles every 18 months while the cost remains constant or drops. What does that mean? Computers get bigger, better, faster, and cheaper. That's Moore's Law. We see it all kinds of different places. It's 50 years old. Everybody's saying it can't go on forever. They're right, but it keeps going. Metcalfe's Law, network effect. That's why we have Facebook. The value of a network increases by the square of the number of connections. The value of LinkedIn increases by the square of the number of connections. The more people you're connected to, the more valuable the platform becomes. Nielsen's Law, bandwidth gets faster. Actually, the law states bandwidth gets 50% faster per year. And we continue to see some of that pushing. Guess what? It's even going to get faster and more ubiquitous. Why? Because Amazon's working on its fourth big bet. Satellite internet. It's called Project Kuiper. So is Elon Musk, right? Putting satellites up. Small, breadbox size, cheap, quote unquote. Low Earth orbit, not the geosynchronous orbit. If you've ever had satellite broadband, it's awful, slow, latency, right? This is going to be down close, significantly closer, which means those satellites are going to fall out of the sky and burn up, but they're so cheap, we'll just put more up to replace them. That's coming. Storage. How much does a hard drive storage space cost today? Well, according to Costco, which is my barometer of hard drive storage space, you can get a 5 terabyte portable hard drive for about $99. How big is 5 terabytes? Really big. I have 7 grandchildren. They're so cute, I have lots of video. Yes, I need 5 terabytes to store this stuff. This is an example of Moore's Law, by the way. This is a chart of doubling a penny every day. At the end of 31 days, you have just over $10 million, but guess what? Nothing for a long time. Very small impact. And we see that with technology a lot. Again, the digital accelerators. I have this idea here, I call it the risk dilemma cycle. This is what happens with technology. Everything's becoming digitized and deceptive. So my example of deceptive right now is machine learning. How long has machine learning been around? How long have scientists and computer scientists been working on machine learning? 50 years. 50 years. But you don't see it. What have you seen over the last 2 years? Driverless cars, and you see Alexa, and you see, right, all kinds of stuff that machine learning. By the way, I'm very specific. We do not have artificial intelligence and won't for 20 or 30 years. But everybody's calling it AI. That's just my pet peeve. But machine learning, pattern matching, recognition, right? All kinds of things that are coming. Why? Deceptive until all of a sudden it's disruptive. So there you can see some of the things, and we see it with the iPhone, and we see it with, right, all kinds of different technology that is impacting us. The question I always ask is, how does that help your business? Or how does that require you or enable you to think about a completely new business model, right? Innovation versus invention. Generate high-velocity decisions. At Amazon, they generate high-velocity decisions. And Bezos describes 2 types of decisions. Type 1, bet the farm, big deal decisions. And Bezos says you take those decisions slowly. You get as much information as possible before you make that decision, because if you walk through that door, it's really hard to turn around and change. You make those decisions really slowly. Type 2 decisions are easily reversible. Again, as he describes it, you walk through that door of a type 2 decision, you look around, you don't like what you see, it's a wrong decision. What do? Make another decision, change, go back through the door, do something else, and do it fast. He says the problem is, when businesses become successful, they tend to make type 2 decisions in a type 1 way. And that slows down decision making, which slows down growth. Type 1, type 2, really good model. He also says, never use one size fits all in your decision making process, and you move the decision authority to the lowest level possible so you can accelerate change. 2, at best, you need to make a decision when you have 70% of the information you wish you had. Because you'll never have it all, and if you wait for 90%, you're going way too slow to keep up with today's consumer, certainly. And 3, you'll never get 100% agreement. In a management team, certainly, right? Have some of you experienced that? And so Amazon has a leadership principle that says, disagree and commit. Meaning, I don't think you're right. But if you think that's the way we should go, I disagree and fully commit to supporting you in any way I can to make it the right decision. He uses an example of a show for Amazon Prime that the team wanted to greenlight. He didn't think it was going to be successful, and he simply wrote back, I disagree and commit, which means I still think it's a failure. I don't think it's going to work, but I hope you prove me wrong. What would happen if you had that kind of mindset in moving decisions forward? So disagree and commit. Number 4, scale. Again, 4 principles here. Maintain your culture. According to Amazon's 2019 10K report, Amazon added 187,000 employees worldwide in 1 year. They now have almost 700,000 employees. How do you maintain a culture when you do that? That was one of my early questions. How do you maintain a culture? Well, I think there's several things that Bezos does and has done over the years, and he talks a lot about culture in his letters. One of the things he says is when you go to write down the culture in your business, you are not creating a culture, you are simply observing what's already there. Culture starts the moment you start your business. And if you're not intentional about that culture, you don't know what's going to happen. So what do? This is a very early picture of Jeff Bezos. Anybody recognize something interesting? The desk. How many of you heard, what's that called? Anybody know? It's called a door desk. The story goes, and again, we have to maybe a little urban legend here, but I think it's probably fairly accurate. When they were at 5 employees, Bezos and another person were on their hands and knees putting books into packages so they could drive them to the post office. By the way, that's an important point. Bezos started just like everyone in here who started a new business. On his hands and knees, putting books in packages. We tend to forget that, given the last few years, right? And Bezos said, this is killing my knees. We need knee pads. And the guy next to him said, we don't need knee pads, we need packing tables. And Bezos looked at him and said, that's the most brilliant thing I've heard. And he realized he could go to Home Depot and buy a solid core door and 4x4s and a couple brackets to build packing desks. Why? Because early on and still today, Amazon's really cheap. Why? Why do you think they're still today really cheap? Culture. But we don't spend stuff on us. We spend stuff on customers. Right? So they still have door desks. In fact, there's a whole video on how to build one if you want to know on Amazon's website. But does that give an image when somebody walks in for the first time as a new employee, or there's a vendor or somebody else there, and they have all this ugly stuff? It communicates, doesn't it? And we're not going through all of these, but I just put these up here. These are Amazon's 14 leadership principles. And employees describe these principles as not something that's just put up on the wall. They talk about these principles every day as they're making decisions. And they use these principles. These are active. That also communicates culture. They also focus on high standards. Have you heard that Amazon's a hard place to work? I was at a recruiting fair. What most people didn't remember or realize, when Amazon announced the HQ2 winners, New York and Crystal City, right outside Washington, D.C., they also announced 5,000 jobs coming to Nashville for their Center of Excellence for Transportation. That building's going up right now. So I don't know whether to be happy or not. Traffic's already bad. But I went. They had, at the Ryman Auditorium, they had a recruiting fair. They bust in college students from all over Middle Tennessee to get the Amazon experience. And David Clark, one of the senior VPs at Amazon, was on stage, and anybody could text questions in. And one of the questions was, I've heard that Amazon is a hard place to work. How would you respond to that? And David Clark said, it is. And he stopped. And he said, because we have high standards at Amazon. And if you go back to the 1997 letter, Bezos said, we are working to build something we can tell our grandchildren about. And that's not easy. And so we will be looking for the employees who can help us make that a reality. So they have 3 hiring questions he talks about in the 98 letter. And he asks, as you're hiring people, ask these questions. Do you admire this person? What do you think about them? Second, will this person raise the average level of effectiveness for the group they are entering? Will they, quote, raise the bar? In fact, he goes on later to explain, I want our current employees to think, boy, I'm glad I got into Amazon when I did, because I don't know that I could make it today with the standards so high. Maintaining high standards. And then third, among what dimension might this person be a superstar? And he goes on to give an example in 98 that there was a person working at Amazon that was a national spelling bee champion. He said, it's just fun to walk down the hall and ask her to spell onomatopoeia. See, what did Bezos know? That the best people are full-dimensional people, right? What else? What creativity? What other things? Amazon has an orchestra at their headquarters, fully volunteer. They play about twice a month. They have artists. They have all kinds of things, right? Why? Because it's a really creative place. And they want people who can think that way. So I've talked a lot about a lot of principles. You're overwhelmed probably right now thinking about it. I have created an assessment whose purpose it is to help you figure out, one, your risk profile and which principles that you might think about looking at first where you are in your business now. No cost to it. It's just a tool that I've developed to put together to help as you're starting to think about how these principles might or might not apply to your own situation. So I'm going to finish with this. What's your return on risk? It's a phrase I came up with, I use in the book. All of you think about return on investment, don't you? You're investing in real estate or your practice or any of these things. You think about what's going to be my return if I invest this. Well, I want you to ask the same question about risk-taking. What's the return if I risk this? Right? And Amazon doesn't do things willy-nilly. Don't get me wrong. In fact, Amazon has an intolerance for incompetence. You're to bring your A game every single day. But if you're not thinking about that, and back to my original question, then how are you going to move forward? Couple of kind of what now. Again, obsess, what technology, you can see some of those there, of how to move forward. And then I'm going to end with this last principle. It is number 14. Believe it's always day one. What does that even mean? Well, for Bezos, it means a lot. And it's, again, another culture aspect, but it's also a mindset. Here's what he says in the 2016 letter. When he was asked, Jeff, what does day two mean? You talk about day one, what does day two mean? And it's, again, a question he's gotten a lot, and he's spent some time thinking about it. Here's what he says day two is. Oh, excuse me. I always get this out of order. This actually is a picture I took at the Amazon headquarters in Seattle, the building where Jeff has his office. It's called the Day One building, right? So, and when he moved offices to a different building, he took the name to the new building. It's very important to him. But here's what he said day two is. Stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. And that is why it's always day one. And we've seen day two, by the way. I can get Sears is an example of day two. Barnes & Noble might be an example of day two. It could take 20 years. It took Sears a long time. But when you start moving into a day two mindset, the end result's inevitable at some point. So what are you doing to walk into your office practice every single morning thinking, it's day one? We're just getting going. There's still so much to be done. And that's what it means to believe it's always day one. So, one second. He ends, since 2007, every letter with a phrase that's really close to this, if not exactly this. One, as always, I attach a copy of my 1997 letter. You talk about long-term vision. That 97 letter, he's still executing today. That's why that letter's so important. And two, our approach remains the same, and it's still day one. All right, so there are the principles. Thank you for spending a little bit of time listening. Thank you.
Wow. That was fascinating. Was that great?
Thank you very much.
I mean, I think there was like a nugget every 5 seconds. I couldn't write down notes fast enough. Problem is, how do you go back and implement all this stuff? Well, you can't all at once, right?
No,
you got to force rank it and figure it out. But gosh, you talk about inflection points. We talk about inflection points, leverage points. You just brought down pages worth. And Chief, back at Baylor, I'm just thinking about, I tried that whole failure thing in Crown Bridge department. They didn't go for it. Like, failing forward fast, they just said, you're out. So I think we can get Bezos to revamp the education system. We need something like that in our system. All right, so we've left some time purposely because I felt like you all would like to engage a little bit with Steve here and go deeper in some of the things he talked about. So we got the catch box out. I'm not going to steal the time. It's open for you. So who's got some questions they'd like to ask Steve while you got the opportunity? Come in. Always makes Alex run on the first run. Well, it's always Bill. But thank you, Bill. Go ahead.
Apparently, I need to stand on that side of the room for him. So, Amazon's employees basically are very happy where they are, right?
Not all of them,
Well, a large majority of them.
I would say.
So why do we always hear that they're not getting a living wage and things suck there?
I think the big five are easy targets, and I think Amazon may be the easiest in terms of its visibility. And certainly with Bezos as being, I believe still, although that's, who knows right now, but still, if not the most, the richest person in the world, certainly close there. Frontline, PBS Frontline just did a almost 2-hour kind of expose on Amazon, and you certainly hear of the, and it's typically the fulfillment center is where you hear the workers. But here are a couple of other points that don't get talked about a lot. First, Amazon was among the first, if not the first, to have a minimum $15 an hour wage at all fulfillment centers. So not, whatever the current minimum wage is, et cetera. Two, what you don't hear about is all that Amazon does to support those employees. So they have what's called career choice, where they actually will pay 95% of tuition for any college, trade school that person wants, because they know often in the fulfillment center it's a stepping stone to something else. And it doesn't have to be related to Amazon. Meaning if somebody wants to be a nurse, they can take nursing school, for example. Also, they last year announced an $800 million investment because those fulfillment centers will be automated. And so that $800 million investment is to train the workers that want into jobs in elsewhere. They need programmers. They need business analysts. They have over 35,000 job openings in the U.S. right now. But again, high standards, at the same time training people to be able to do some of that. So I don't think the whole story gets out.
Sure.
And you certainly hear, and I think the bell-shaped curve is probably right. I mean, there are people who don't like that rigor. And it's hard working there. I mean, I've been into two. And my question right now, and I'm exploring this for an article of some kind, but can customer obsession go too far? Because it's customer obsession that drives productivity to get those packages now in 1 day, not just 2 days. Right? So, and what I've seen over and over again at Amazon is if they are convinced they're wrong, they change. Oh, here's one other thing they do that's not talked about at fulfillment centers, is they have a pay-to-quit program. They got it from Zappos when they acquired Zappos. So after 1 year working at a fulfillment center, they get a letter, an email, and it basically says, we hope you don't take this offer. And it's for $1,000 to quit. And it goes up over 5 years to $5,000. Because what do they know?
Well, if you're not happy,
if you're not happy there,
and they don't want you anyway.
Again, culture, right? It's going to affect all kinds of things. And so they adapted that from Zappos, which has a similar program when they hire new people.
All right, lastly, this is just a comment on the benefit of failure.
Yes.
People are always complaining that Amazon makes all this money, but they don't pay any tax because they're paying for the failures that didn't work out.
Yeah, right? I mean, for up until I don't remember exactly the year, but up until probably 2014 or 15, they didn't show a profit because they were what? Reinvesting into their infrastructure, fulfillment centers, right? And what doesn't get talked about is third-party sellers. There are thousands of businesses that have been created because Amazon had the foresight to open their platform and those customers to any business. And again, now they're getting hammered a little bit, right? Because of the last couple of weeks, predatory pricing on mass, for the coronavirus stuff. But they're taking quick action to put that back. So that's maybe a downside of self-service. But who else?
Hi. Well, as far as we have a fulfillment center by where I live.
Hold that. We'll just a little higher.
Yeah, we have a fulfillment center where I live, and actually, I've gotten patients that have dental insurance from them.
Yeah.
But my question is, I'm from New York. Of course, you know what happened with the Amazon
Uh-huh.
headquarters. But they were looking at Washington and New York, and we have all these unemployed people in the flyover states, and I'm wondering, why doesn't Amazon invest in some of those areas instead of the coasts, and just...
Well, so I got a couple answers for that. I think fulfillment centers, they actually invest a lot in the middle of the country. And I do believe that people have misunderstood the HQ2 reasons behind it. Amazon thinks long term. Actually, Bezos thinks multi-generational. So if I get a moment, I'll talk about Blue Origin. My point there is one of their biggest problems right now is hiring tech talent. So and not now, but they see what's coming. And so that was a way, and they felt New York and Washington would have the best opportunity for the colleges around and the talent that they could hire. That's why, anybody ever wonder why Seattle? Bezos lived in New York. Reason. 2 reasons. Microsoft, programming talent. And the 2 largest book distributors both had warehouses outside, within easy driving distance of Seattle. Baker and Taylor and Ingram were the book distributors. So they're thinking 5 to 7 years out in terms of where are they going to need. The fulfillment centers, they continue, the fulfillment centers, the data centers, they continue to build, right? And I think they know that the fulfillment center is hard work, and so that is pushing them to automate as much of that. And they, like I already said, they also have invested money to help retrain. But if somebody don't want to retrain, they can't force them. So that's the problem issue. I think the whole New York thing, my opinion only, is they were assured it wouldn't be a problem. And frankly, Amazon's not going to go where they're not wanted. And a lot of comments around in terms of, well, that's New York, and if you can't tough it out, and they just decided. Interesting to me to think about picking a second headquarters as a type 1 decision. It ended up being type 2, didn't it? Because how fast did they change their mind when they realized it was going to be not worth their energy to try and make it in New York, unfortunately.
I think the tax breaks had a lot to do with it, too.
Yeah, the problem is the tax breaks they had to earn out. They weren't money given. They were money earned based on jobs. And actually, the New York State, I can't remember his exact title now, wrote a very good, from his perspective, of how all of the tax stuff worked and how it would be over multi-years and all of that. But the $3 billion number got out. That was the point. No question. Yeah.
Chris, over to Mark, if you would, to the right. Thanks.
Just curious if you know anything of their intent on drone technology. Is that going to be a very real thing where you have a QRC code on top of the building and drone technology is dropping the packages that way?
Yeah, my opinion is absolutely. That's an area in the insurance industry that I spend a lot of time looking at in terms of not just Amazon, but delivery and all kinds of stuff. I think it's taking them a lot longer than they expected. Part of that's regulatory, just in terms of FAA and airspace and all kinds of complicated factors there. You don't hear as much about that anymore.
And is that because they've invested so much in their fleets of vehicles that are out there now, that they're less concerned about the speed to get there?
I think it could be. So they're building, for example, they're in Cincinnati Airport. They're building basically a hub system for their fleet. They continue to add airplanes. If I was UPS or FedEx, I'd be worried. Because what do we know that Amazon does? Makes complexity simple. PillPack, maybe a little closer to the health side. Amazon's making a big move into health. That I know, right, from a couple standpoints. One, they acquired PillPack for $1 billion. Do you know PillPack?
Yeah.
Okay. So great service, actually, for those that need it. They basically take people who have multiple medications, and they package every dose in a separate envelope, separate whatever it's called. And so, it's 8 a.m. on Monday morning, you take these, and there may be 3 or 4 or 5 in there. So you don't have to, all the little pill cases and all of that kind of stuff. Bought it for $1 billion. Just a couple weeks after that, I heard a recording of the CEO of Walgreens on an earnings call. And he was asked, are you worried, right? Because they're, by the way, Walgreens, Rite Aid, and CVS stock, I don't remember the number now, but tanked right after that announcement. And he said, well, I'm not worried about Amazon coming into the pharmacy business. Actually, it's much more complex than they realize. And I literally said out loud in the car, which is why it's in the book. I said out loud, but that's what Amazon does, is they make complex things simple to the consumer. So healthcare, they're making a big move in terms of supplies, right? Services are, masks and hospital stuff, I think primarily. And then also they're making a big move in their partnership with Berkshire Hathaway, JP Morgan, and Amazon for employee healthcare. And in Seattle, they opened late, I think it was late last year, Amazon.care. Just go to Amazon.care, and it's a telemedicine, but also home visit solution for Amazon employees. So again, what do you know about Amazon? Experiment, 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 figure out, test, close, move forward. You'll see a lot more of that coming up in the next few years.
Got time for one more. Who's got another question for Steve? Okay, MJ, you got it.
Here.
Steve, thank you, Stephen.
My pleasure.
When it comes to the question of this employee of the month and most successful failure, and my thought in terms of application, that's something that is at management level, but if you would just kind of peel the onion back at what different level departments and so forth does that actual concept go to?
Okay, so in my research, I came across just a handful of companies that actually implement something like that. The one I found most interesting was an advertising firm in New York City, Gray Advertising. And the example so they have a heroic failure award is what they call it. And they had one of their accounts pitch, they were pitching a campaign for a cat litter company. And so she went to the zoo and got panther excrement and put it in a box with the litter they were supposedly going to push and put it underneath the conference room table during the presentation. And at the yeah, she thought it was a good idea to say, hey, your stuff actually works, and so at the end of the presentation, she kind of pulled it out from under the table and said, here's what it is, and here's why we think this can work, and it didn't go over well. And they didn't get the account. Creativity, willing to try something new, so she got the Heroic Failure Award. And what does that communicate back to employees, right? It's, again, people aren't afraid of failure, people are afraid of the consequences of failure. We fail all the time, we know that, but we try and hide it, right? Because too many businesses are punishing that. Your career, right, takes a hit, whatever that might mean. And if we allowed that creativity, now again, I always have to say in that same breath, Amazon is intolerant of incompetency. So again, that high standard comes into play. And they have some tools, by the way, to help with that process. One of them, I know we're out of time, but one of them is called the 6-page memo. So what I did is banned at Amazon. No PowerPoints are ever used at Amazon anywhere. If there's a meeting where a decision needs to be made, the person calling the meeting is required, depending on the level, right, kind of how high up, it could be a 2-page, right? but maximum a 6-page written memo about the decision. Here's the data, and it always starts with a future press release. The press release that will be released the day this new product or service is released. And that is not passed out beforehand. It's passed out at the beginning of the meeting, and everybody spends the first 10, 15, 20, whatever minutes reading the memo, so literally everybody is on the same page.
Or at least 70% of the people.
Well, at least they have no excuse, right? Because Bezos says executives are busy, they're going to say they read it and didn't, and then you're going to get questions that are answered in the I mean, it's the idea of slowing down to speed up.
Yep. So good. Give a big hand to Mr. Steve Andersson.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That was great. That was just really, really good. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Tell us where you want us, right? Like right here?
In the middle.
All right. Trying to check with the shadows, make sure we got.
Say cheese.
Cheese.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give it up one more time for Steve Andersson. Wow, what a wealth of insight. And not just, I mean, tremendous takeaways from a business standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, but also just to understand the trends that are at work in the economy, in the big picture of where we're headed economically. Tremendous amount of insight. Very good. Well, at this time, Free for Life members, you guys are going to have a special treat. Steve has agreed to stick around for a little while. Y'all are going to have a little private reception with Steve. You're going to get a chance to hang out with him for about a half hour here, and that's going to be up on the 4th floor in our breakout room. So right now, if you would, follow Lucy. That's Free for Life members. Follow Lucy. Lucy, raise your hand. There you go. And she'll take you up there. You'll have about 30 minutes to continue this conversation with Steve Andersson. All the rest of us, we're going to take that extended networking break that I mentioned earlier today, and I will see you back here in the Landmark Ballroom at 4 o'clock, 4 p.m. I'll see you back. Thank you.